Great. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second public user feedback session. Our first was on benchmarking, and this time we have a collection of folks throughout the Node.js user tooling community. So, very, very interesting, bringing together a very interesting group of folks, end users of Node in a way, but, very much, leveraging the platform. And we're going to, dive in, get to know folks, and share some experiences and hopefully build some connective tissue back to the Node.js project. So I want to get into everybody's introduction, and before I go around, I'd like to give the floor to Chris Hiller, maintainer of Mocha, who is kind of the starting spark for this group. So Chris, we got together at IBM Index here in San Francisco and had a nice conversation about how Nodejs Tooling folks would like to get more involved in the Nodejs project. So you want to kick us off before I do intros?
Sure. Yeah. So I came to Dan, and I had kind of noticed over the years that most of the people working on core were really focused on deploying Node as a server or a microservice. Or the people working on core were really focused. And so, sorry, I'm getting some echo. Anyway, so I came to Dan with this, and I was like, there's not a whole lot of, I guess, representation, more or less, from people who consume Node, either as users or maintainers or creators of command line tooling. And there's just a ton of command line tooling for Node. People are writing more and more tools every day in Node, and it's the challenges that we face are vastly different from trying to, basically scale a node, or a lot of the times we're not as worried about performance and that sort of thing. And so our concerns have often more to do with user experience, maybe. So that's just kind of the idea I had. I thought that maybe it would be a great idea for some people to come together and try to increase lines of communication between the people using Node for tooling and core. It's nowadays the whole web is built on Node.js command line tooling. Everybody's using Babel or Webpack or whatever. So yeah, that was just kind of the idea, and so here we are.
Great. Well, thanks, Chris, and really appreciate you putting in the legwork to bring everybody together. Really excited to do this, and just for those who are joining or tuning into user feedback, we exist under the charter of the community committee in the Nodejs project. And as a team, we get together bi-weekly. This is our team meeting session, and about once a month is how we've lined up. We've kind of made a commitment to doing it once a quarter, but once every a couple months we get together and we have public sessions that bring together folks from all across the Node project. So let me introduce folks. I'm Dan Shaw. I'm the champion side of the community committee for the User Feedback Initiative. I'm a ComCom member, and I am a member of the nascent mentorship group. I'm going to go around my screen, so I don't know if anyone can sort of predict who's getting called next, but I'll go ahead and call you. Sorry for not having predictability with Zoom. Tierney, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tierney Saren. I'm chairperson of the community committee, the Node.js community committee, and I'm a developer advocate at NodeSource.
Awesome, thank you, Tierney. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Turner. I'm the NPM CLI lead, and I'm also involved occasionally with Node.js things. Currently, the modules working group.
Nice. Thank you. Kent?
Hi, I'm Kent C. Dodds. I work for PayPal as a JavaScript engineer. Do a lot of tooling stuff for them and lots of tooling stuff in the open source ecosystem. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Mihai?
Hi, I'm Mihai. I'm a project manager acting in Portland area, and right now I'm a member of user feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Dawson?
I'm the chair of the TSC, member of ComCom, member of a bunch of the working groups, and solid supporter of the user feedback group and member. So happy to have you here.
Great. Gleb?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gleb Akhmudov. I run engineering at Cypress. We love Node across all platforms, and we love NPM.
Nice. Uttam?
Hi, my name is Uttam. I work at Intel. I focus on performance side of the Node.js runtime, and I work actively in Node.js benchmarking group with Mike Dawson.
Great. Hi, Ben. Thanks for coming on screen. Whenever you're ready.
Oh, sure. I guess I guessed accurately. I'm Ben Newman. I work on the Meteor.js open source framework, the lead developer for that. And I guess the most unusual thing that we do with Node is we ship a specific version of Node with each release of Meteor. So you don't bring your own Node, you sort of get it from your version of Meteor. Anyway.
One quick question before I forget. Have we added you to the distributors list?
I think not. That may be related to some of the questions that I have for this meeting.
Okay, so maybe let's catch up on, we just have like an app mention team that we use to mention people who like either bundle or redistribute Node. So just probably get you added to that.
Yeah, I'll make a note.
Great. We'll set aside Node core work till later, though.
You're distracted. Don't want to forget because you can forget later on.
Thank you both. Ben, will Jesse be joining us? Do you know?
He will not. He has an interview to do right now.
Okay. Great. So, Chris, I guess you introduce yourself, but you introduce your project and your stuff.
Hi, my name's Chris. I'm a maintainer of Mocha. I work at IBM as a developer advocate, and that's my story. I'm turning off my camera now.
Thanks. JDD, great to see you. Are you on enough?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. So hi, I'm John David Dalton. I'm the maintainer of Lotus utility library. I'm also creator of an ESM module loader.
Excellent. So at this point, I think I have gone through everybody. Did I miss anybody? So raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll dive into the session questions. Okay, so let me just sanity check one thing. So non-tooling folks, folks that I will not be calling, and let me know if I am mistaken and you want me to call and give feedback. Tierney, Michael Dawson, Mihai, and that's it. Uttam, you're here representing Intel's tooling, right?
That's right.
Cool. All right. So Tierney, you are not here representing Nodejs Tooling or anything like that today?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
Okay, great. Just so we're all clear, and I'm not skipping over anybody unwarningly. So let's go into our first question, which is describe how your Nodejs tooling leverages Node.js. I'm going to drop this into our chat so everyone can see this as we go around our fairly lengthy group. And I think there's no better place to start with Nodejs tooling than to start with NPM. So Rebecca, do you want to start with this question?
Sure. So there are a couple. There are kind of two things I want to hit on there. One is, our observation of the community is that the majority of Node.js users at this point are not writing Node.js server apps. They're consuming Node.js tools to build websites, and so they are primarily consumers of the tooling that the people here are making, more than they are authors of tooling. But like their experience of Node.js is deeply rooted in how the tooling works. Mm-hmm. And then of course, NPM itself is where I spend my time. I also, like all of my command line stuff these days seems to be, written out in Node.js, if only because like familiarity of, that's where I've been, that's where my headspace has been. All the things I used to write in Perl, somehow, despite Node.js not really being the most appropriate replacement language,
right?
It's still pretty good, all things considered. So yes, say that's
and you can read it later once you've written it, which is also novel.
I like my Perl. I can totally read my Perl. I don't have to write it that way.
Right. No, I enjoy Perl. So all right. So can everyone? Michael, I didn't quite understand your question. I don't. Although I'm not sure who all can see. Can everyone see the topic that I have?
That was just I pasted the channel that I was talking about earlier. So just ignore for now and keep on moving.
Again, that Node.js work they were trying to slip in. Yeah. Kent, describe your tooling and how it leverages Node.js.
Yeah, sure. So my experience has been very similar to Rebecca's, what she mentioned, or what you mentioned. So yeah, like all of my tooling is in Node, and it's primarily to build websites. But at PayPal, we also have a fair amount of tooling for building and packaging up our Node servers as well. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, but it's all in Node, all in JavaScript. Just like Rebecca said, despite it maybe not being the best tool for the job technically, the benefits of just having a single language for everything are just like so huge. Being able to have contributors who may not be super experienced in tooling in general, they can contribute because they know JavaScript. So yeah, most of our tooling is in the form of CLIs as well. So that's about it.
One quick question. I assume you use Node.js to deploy production servers as well, right? Because I think Rebecca was mentioning that they see most people using, maybe I misinterpreted, but mostly using it for tooling as opposed to the web servers. I'm thinking, at least from what I've heard, that you guys do both, right?
Yes. So PayPal uses Node for tooling as well as for our servers and for deploying those servers as well. There's a little mix of some Java stuff, legacy related things, but for the most part, it's deployed and built and run with Node.
Thanks.
Ken, do you have any legacy like Node stuffed in Java tooling? Like NPM scripts that run and build a thing that you jammed in a war and then deployed?
Not quite. We do have like our pipeline for building our apps is we have this Node thing on Jenkins that builds out the whole thing, and then we have this Java thing that packages it all up into a manifest file, and then that goes up to our servers, which will deploy things, and on that side, it's all Node.
Right on. Gleb, how's your tooling leveraging Node.js?
Everything we do now runs on Node, right? So we have an open source test runner that we build on all 3 platforms using Node. So like Rebecca said, I don't want to install Perl. I don't want to rely on scripts. It's all shell.js. Just give me a Docker container with Node, and the rest will be the same. We have SaaS as well, so all runs Node. Node scripts deploy everything, version everything. I would say our biggest challenge right now with Node.js tooling is the slight differences in how the tools or Node treats like, child processes and direct streams, right? And Windows versus, let's say, the rest, right? So that was the biggest pain point. But we are okay with that. We can live with that compared to other systems. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry. So having Node as a platform, and we can rely on that across platforms, despite little differences, is a godsend.
So the slight differences you're talking about is slight differences across platforms, like between Windows and Linux. And okay, good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Someone has to unmute himself or herself.
Dan, you're muted. Still muted, Dan.
Oh, I'm muted.
I am muted you now. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry, I was calling on Uttam, but of course Uttam didn't hear anything I said because I was muted too, including saying that you're muted.
No, I did not hear anything. No, I did not hear anything. So,
thank you.
So at Intel, we really don't have anything tooling as far as leveraging Node.js. As I said, we kind of focus only on the performance side of Node.js runtime. We do have our own Intel's vTune analyzer tool, which to again measure the performance and track the hotspots in your application. But we did develop this workload, which we contributed to Node.js benchmarking, and we use all the NPM standard packages, the Mongoose, and that kind of tooling we have or we have used so far. But we don't have any expertise in, like all others, to develop any new tools or use Node.js some different ways. We really don't have that expertise. Yeah.
So, since we have so many command line developers, how does vTools, connect to Node? It's a very, very different model, and I think that's worth exploring a little bit more. What's the hook between the Intel vTool?
Yeah, so Intel, so we have this vTune support in V8,
vTune,
and
sorry.
that's where it leverages. Yes, so we have contributed. So general JavaScript application which is in a browser, user can use vTune directly. But now that we have the V8 support, we can leverage into Node.js. So you run Node.js regularly and you run vTune from command line, or it's a C program on Linux, and it captures all the hardware counter data and kind of gives you micro-architectural level information about the hotspots in your application. For example, if your application is too big, it can tell you there are 100 or 50% iCache misses, or you have a lot of front-end bound issues. You're generating a lot of code for a particular application, and all those things which normally you don't get. You do get that from perf in a way, but you don't get from the higher level tools. But that's the low level data you get from vTune.
Right. So Ben, you touched on in your intro, how Meteor is using Node. You want to dive into how your tooling leverages Node.js?
Yeah, I have been working on Meteor since 2014, so not since its beginning. But one of the things I've tried to do as an overarching goal is sort of realign Meteor with the cow paths that have been paved and the awesome work that's happened in the Node and NPM ecosystem. Since Meteor was first started. So we fully embrace NPM, even though we still have our own package system. And of course, we depend very heavily on Node. And as I said, one of the sort of weird things that we do for our own sanity, as much as anything, is ship specific version of Node in every Meteor release. And it's been really nice over the years because it means we just don't have to like test a whole matrix of Meteor versions versus Node versions. And it's like a relatively small team of people working on it. So that's very important for our velocity. But it also means as soon as the version of Node that we're using has a particular like cool new feature, like the inspector in late versions of Node 7, Node 8, we can just ship that as like a standard experience. We don't have to have like a degraded version of it in, if you're using an older version of Node, because we can just make that assumption. So that's been really nice. And one way that we've made that work for our users is that you can type Meteor Node and then Node arguments, and it just like defers to exactly the version of Node that you're using for the current app, Meteor app that you're working on. We do the same thing for NPM and NPX and even Yarn, so that it's just very easy to use exactly the same versions that Meteor ships with, and also yeah, I forget what the other thing that was nice about that, but it helps a lot. And I don't know, I think we've been able to let people really feel like they're using Node and NPM directly, even though they're kind of living in this Meteor mindset, which we're trying to like reduce to a minimum over time.
One quick question: do you stick to the LTS lines or use other lines?
We were on Node 0.10 for way too long.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we jumped to Node 4, which was at the time LTS. And in the most recent sort of major version, Meteor 1.6, we changed the minor versions rather than the major semantic version number. We jumped straight to Node 8. So we've kind of skipped some Node versions, but now that we're on Node 8, we're basically keeping up to date with the latest Node 8 version.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
So what's the upgrade path there? Like, how do you kind of eventually move from LTS to LTS? And like when 10 becomes LTS, is that going to be an easy transition for you, or is there anything that's kind of a barrier on the Node side that you kind of see as like holding you back?
Yeah, so far as we've made like comparatively huge leaps, it's actually been fairly straightforward, at least from the perspective of the end user, because we're able to just like take a Meteor app that was at the previous version that was working and see what happens when we try running Meteor update to get to the new version, and just like repeatedly examining what breaks when you try to do that, inviting people to let us test their actual apps, and having a few internal apps of our own, like the Galaxy posting service, means we can just really like smooth that update experience. And what do the like internal changes end up looking like? We go through the list of breaking changes. We updated new buffer to buffer from in a lot of cases. But for the most part, although we point people to those lists, we haven't had to like hold people's hands to update that kind of stuff in their own apps, though we certainly have to pay attention to it in like the implementation of the command line tool.
Cool. Awesome.
So I'm trying to resist asking too many questions, but I do have one question that will kind of color how we integrate this into the rest of the Node.js project.
Yeah.
Do Meteor users consider themselves Node.js users?
Yes, absolutely. I would say we are not in any way trying to interpose our brand between the user and Node. And if if fixing a problem in your app means, getting up to date with something that's changed in Node, understanding how Node works under the hood, then that's definitely the direction we would push people, rather than trying to pretend that like Node doesn't exist. And for us, that's been really important, because it means that people know they can, for the most part, just like drop an existing Node project like into a subdirectory of a Meteor app and it should just work. That's an expectation we want them to have. And vice versa. Like if they decide to move off of Meteor for whatever reason, the code they've written isn't this like weird dialect that would be impossible to, put into just a plain Node application.
Great. Thanks, Ben. So I want to highlight that we'll try to come back with some time at the end for general questions. So I'm going to ask us to move us along after I've indulged in my own question.
I will say we've had a few people join. Sean joined, Sean Larkin.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure you knew that.
I saw, and hi, Sean. I want to thank Sean and Gus and Kelly for all joining. I'm gonna go ahead and let the folks that joined on time go through the current topic, which is describing how your tool leverages Node.js, and then at the end of that, I'll let you introduce yourselves. And this is our first topic, so it'd be a great time for you to jump in.
No worries. I may have to jump out myself then, just because time is really short, but I'll make sure to provide feedback in the thread.
Sounds good, Sean.
All right, thank you.
All right. So next up, Chris, the Mocha and how it leverages Node.js.
Hi. Mocha is a testing framework for JavaScript, and so it probably should be written in JavaScript. That's about all I know. It's Node.js launcher for testing Node, and you can use it in the browser. But that's about the size of it. In my own work outside of Mocha, I've looked at doing things like using Node to create like a bundlers for deploying code to various serverless frameworks and things like that. And so that's basically just how I use it. But it's of course there's a ton of stuff going on at IBM that I don't really know too much about. There's Loopback and that team writing their tools there. So, but yeah, that's about all I got.
Thanks, Chris.
That is a good point. Maybe for the next time, I should get somebody from the Loopback team to join us as well.
Right on. Sounds good. So JDD.
Hi. Okay. Lodash uses Node. Lodash is started out as UMD, which means it works in the browser. I mean, it worked in Adobe Illustrator. It works in Rhino. It did all kinds of stuff. But as time has gone on, we've used Node more and more to generate various builds of Lodash. So Lodash is now built with Node. And I'm specializing more for just modern environments and ECMAScript modules. So it's going to be leveraging those things that are in Node. I'm also working on a module loader, which is all Node. It's adding ES syntax to Node. So that's getting into module loader algorithms, all the resolution stuff under the hood, tying into experimental things like VM module, all of that kind of stuff. So I've been becoming more active in the Node issue tracker because of that, to like fix bugs on various flags and features to kind of unblock or ease the path there. I also work at Microsoft, and we are big consumers of Node, part of the Node Foundation, doing the NAPI work, Chakra Node, all that stuff. So lots and lots of Node consumption here. But it's Microsoft is kind of like multiple companies in one. I mean, every team is their own thing, but it's just like any other application development thing. I mean, it's all consuming Node. You can't create a modern web application without using Node and the tools around Node to do that. So
great. So is Lodash using ESM?
Lodash 5
is that as an implementation space for?
So Lodash 5 will use the ESM loader. There's a build of Lodash now that is written entirely in ESM, and that's Lodash ES. So the next major version will be all ESM. And then we'll require build tools or bundlers for consumption outside of that. I'm dropping our CLI tool. We used to have a tool that would create custom builds, and now that Webpack is a thing, people can just use Webpack to create their builds with cherry picking and side effect free builds too. So you're always going to get the smallest bundle size as well. So I'm starting to shed all the tools we used to maintain in favor of the ones that the ecosystem has kind of picked up on.
Right on.
Yeah.
Great. So looks like we may have lost Sean to scheduling. So bye, Sean. Thanks for coming by. Kelly Selden. Kelly, I forget what project you're coming from. So if you could briefly introduce yourself and then describe how your tooling is leveraging Node.js.
Sure. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I work on Ember CLI, and so that is the build tool for Ember.js projects. And we chose a while ago a underlying build system called Broccoli.js. I would say that we're probably the only user of it right now. And then we compile down to AMD for the browser, and that is also a fairly legacy concern that hasn't changed over the years. I would say, I guess, some of the ways or / issues we're using Node with. So our Broccoli build system does a lot of file system thrashing, and that is very concerning once you get to a Windows system. So we have lots of time spent improving our symlinks and improving our documentation as far as how Windows users can get around their symlink blocks on their systems. So that's something we deal with a lot. We are also heavily we also have an LTS system, and we also, part of our LTS is tied to Node LTS. So that is one of our guarantees / nice to have for big companies that are concerned with LTSs. We like to cater to them as well. And so, but one of the downsides is we're testing Node 4 for a long time, and we're writing, and I try to avoid a transpiler because I just love the debugging experience of that native JS. So we were writing Node 4 code for a long time. And so we end up using things like the co package to get generators and yields in our tests. So we end up embracing some workarounds. Sometimes we're considering doing the standard ESM as well. Another thing is our community is very interested in the whole monorepo revolution as well. And so we are working our way around supporting that as well, whether it's Yarn workspaces or Lerna or what have you. Those are just some of the notes I jotted while I was listening to other people talk.
Awesome, Kelly. That's great context.
Quick question. So when you say your LTS is tied to Node.js LTS versions, is it that you basically support the same cycle, or is it, just what's the linkage between the two?
Yes. So as far as our Ember.js runtime, it has its own LTS, which is a 6 or 8 week release cycle. It's a lot like Chrome. And our build system, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily have an LTS. We support the latest release, but the latest release supports Node LTSs, like the current one. So our currently released Ember CLI is going to work with Node 4. And like our current master of Ember CLI, which is going to be released in 12 weeks, it's already supporting Node 6. I mean, it already dropped Node 4. I don't know. You're muted.
Yeah, Michael, you're muted.
Right. So yeah, just so I understand. So it's not that you have an LTS for your versions of the modules, but that you make sure you support the Node LTS versions for their lifespan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I'm super interested in this bit, and I've actually, a few people who have jumped in to this discussion have asked me about this privately, and how to handle like Node LTS stuff. I have questions about that, but I do want to make sure with the other user feedback members, we've gone through one question and we're 42 minutes in. Should we? What's the?
Wait, I have another person to get to.
Okay. I didn't realize that. Cool. Didn't realize there was another person. So yeah, I just want to make sure we're time checking and have open feedback. Cool.
Thanks
So
for
go
time
ahead.
checking. Yep. I think that's a good point. And I think there's an interesting topic area emerging around LTS and an opportunity to come back and have further discussion around that. So let's just make note of that and see that as an opportunity to come back and do further sessions. Right on. And Rebecca, I'd love to get your input. It sounds like there's a triangulation amongst tooling members that and how we're dealing with what is the impact of upstream LTS, and it's not Meteors is a very unique one, and I think the larger tooling base is aligning to that major release, but it isn't necessarily a integrator of that distribution. Interesting. So last but not least, Gus. Gus, thank you for joining. I don't know if you're tooling or Node.js from the invites. So please excuse my ignorance. If you'd like to introduce yourself and describe how your tooling leverages Node.js, that's great. If you're a Node contributor and just joining us, please just introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah. I'm just kind of here. I don't have any tooling.
Cool.
I'm just kind of joining in to kind of take a perspective on this based on, we've been looking at tooling a lot in the Node modules group. And I just kind of wanted to see what, tooling authors were doing to kind of get a better understanding.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. And before you joined, I kind of filtered out some of the folks that are here from the Node project, here to listen. And I will include you in that group of folks as I go around and ask folks the questions. Thanks, Gus. All right, so I want to focus on the negative. We have a few questions: what's working, what's not working. To give everybody the appropriate forum to say their piece and to really focus the open forum discussion. I'd like to hear, while we're gathered together and we have the ear of the Nodejs project, what's not working with the Nodejs tooling ecosystem. Where are our pain points? So we can begin identifying them and addressing that. And let me go ahead and drop this into our section. let me start from the end and make this interesting. I'll throw this one to JDD first.
Hi. Okay. So for me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So for me, I try to work across multiple versions of Node, at least the LTS ones, and there's issues like certain APIs are added in let's say Node 8, but Node 6 doesn't have them, so you have to end up juggling there. There's also things that are really handy that are pseudo-private and that have not made their way to being public yet. And part of me feels like the culture in Node is if I bring it up, there's a chance they'll go, oh, we should actually lock that down more and then take away the handy feature instead of exposing that handy feature in a consumable way. So I'm torn a lot of times on whether I should open an issue or not, because I know that the hacky way still works. And as long as no one pokes at it, that hacky way will continue to work. But I've seen it work out positively and negatively too. So like right now, like one of the features I love that have been added in, which is the types methods with util.types, and you get all of those handy things. I would actually like to expand some of those too. So I dig that. The thing coming from the outside is that that I think if we're going to focus on negatives is I think that there's an attitude in Node core that Userland is less than, and I wish that was different. There's a lot of times where they'll see a Userland solution as not even viable, and as someone that basically works in Userland, it's kind of it's disappointing that a lot of times in order to get Node's attention, you have to mention the word fork, or they're deaf to it, and so that's I would really like for Userland and ecosystem things to be recognized as important. Without the ecosystem, Node as it is today would not exist. So.
Just to make that concrete, like when you say they don't see it as a viable option in Userland,
yeah,
I'm trying to I see also people who are very much small core, which would say do things in Userland. So I'm just trying to understand.
It's more for things like, so if there is solutions or there is implementations of things that starting out in Userland should be seen as an okay or acceptable thing. A lot of times they'll say things like, for example, we're debating about fetch and then looking at Node fetch, which is an external package, and how that relates to Node core. I think that Node should be open to pulling in packages, or at least looking at how external packages do things to implement them in core. A lot of times there's basically a mindset of it has to be native only. It can't exist through something other than V8 hooks or C++ implementations. And I think that, especially for things that are experimental or work in progress, Userland implementations or JavaScript realm implementations should be seen as okay and as an option for new features.
Michael, I muted you, but I also need us to move on.
Okay. I'll follow up with you later on that one, John.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rebecca has a hard stop. I want to make sure we hear the NPM perspective. So Rebecca, can I have you jump into what's not
yeah. So probably the longest standing infrastructure related thing has to do with libuv does a lot of hiding platform differences for us, and it mostly does a very good job. But there are some rough edges, especially around error handling, where the error codes that you get for the same problem are completely unrelated from platform to platform. And you just have to, the only way to know what those error codes are is to go out and try them out, because Node just reports whatever OS error it got. The BUV actually, of course, just forwards on the OS error that it got. Yes, eperm for, file doesn't exist.
Right.
And it's like, and sometimes this is just because, of course, I can understand why no one wanted to tackle that, because it's an immense and difficult problem. Some level of document, we don't even have documentation on like what errors you can get from different commands. It's like, it might throw something. If it went wrong, what will it throw? Try it out and find out. See if it breaks. So that's when we were first talking about doing this meeting, that was the thing that was most that immediately came to my mind.
Right on.
There have been, it's like historically we've had some other things around how Clyde tools, Clyde tool UX is all through STDIO, and we had a lot of STDIO juggling. I think that's solid now, so I don't expect to have that in the future. But that was certainly an interesting experience. Like when Node changed some settings, and it had this whole cascading effect that ultimately resulted in stuff behaving strange on Linux installations, and later on more broadly. And I don't know, like that comes down to of course, like that one, it's like, would have any of us pointed that out as a problem if we had seen it in advance? And I don't know if that's true, but it is like that is the place where, as a Clyde developer, I have to be like, if I'm looking at Node core changes, that's the place where I'm going to be the most nervous. Changes to those, like how we talk to our users, which is all STDIO. So.
Right on. Yeah, and so tooling folks are tuned into, Node is extremely active in terms of its contributor base. Not the same with libuv. There's a very, very small group of folks working on that. So call to action, great opportunity to go work on really low level event stuff across all platforms. But there's definitely you were seeing repercussions of a very small team there. Okay. So Tierney wants to direct a question to everybody that we're going to respond to in the issue number 45.
Yeah, that works. So I'd just like to kind of ask everyone, what would you like to see out of this kind of meeting in the future? I think this has been valuable for the project, and this is a good first trial of this kind of meeting. And I definitely think that Michael and I both have some takeaways to go and try to act on. But we definitely like to make sure that this is kind of something that has a little bit more of a cadence, and that we're enabling the ecosystem to kind of start giving more feedback to core. And so I'd just be interested to see what y'all think is going to be a good way to make this successful for you and useful for you. And not that you have to come to every meeting, but just when you have something, or when you have something you'd like to share, or you'd like to join in on the discussion, what would that be? What would that ideal meeting look like for you? And like Dan said, please respond to the issue with that, because we definitely don't have time to go through everyone and kind of get that feedback today. But I did definitely want to reach out and just make sure that we're capturing that, so we can kind of iterate and make sure that this is a success for everyone, and make sure that everyone is getting as much value out of this as possible.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously this is just the beginning of, we've just sort of saw the tip of the iceberg in terms of what discussions we can have here. So we need to figure out how we continue the discussion, whether it's additional meetings or some other channel. So yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Great. Yeah. So please post that issue, and this group is designed for what JDD mentioned in terms of providing that venue, for the initial discussion, but we're not necessarily the end all be all. I'd like to see this potentially grow into a more active group that's focused on this, and we'll continue our journey of providing the public forum. So, Kelly, what isn't working with the Node.js ecosystem for the Ember team? Any pain points?
Nothing other than what I said already comes to mind.
Okay, great. So in the sake of time, we'll move on. Chris, any major concerns with the Mocha ecosystem around Node?
Was that directed at me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So my frustrations with I don't know, just from a technical standpoint are again, cross-platform issues. It's, just like, for example, fs.watch just has so many problems. And I don't think there's really any champion there for fs.watch. Nobody wants to try to figure it out. And, well, it's probably because it's really hard, right? But, yeah, why are there things like, why do we need cross-spawn? Why do we need cross-env? Why do we need something built on top of FS Watch to make it usable? Why do we need graceful FS? All these things that seem to me that that's just kind of where I'm going with it. It's just these cross-platform gotchas and incompatibilities and just kind of neglected areas of Node's core code base.
Great. Well, it's good feedback to the Node project. That we're aware of the areas of neglect, right? And we feel that downstream. All right. So Kent,
can I ask just one question, very quick? Do you think this is unique to tooling, the cross-platform concerns? Because it's sort of the first I've heard from, like, the end users weren't mentioning it specifically. So I'm just wondering, do you think there's something special about the tooling, or it's just that you're the first people to say it so that we've heard it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's much more obvious. I mean, how many people are, I don't know. I mean, who's deploying to Windows 10? I don't know. But who's using Node tools on Windows 10?
Okay, so it is something that
quite a few more people. So
okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah, and the file system operations is many times the primary action of a tooling where in a web server you're probably not hitting disk at all. All right, let me mute Michael here. Kent,
I was going for it too.
Yeah, awesome. I'm so glad that Christopher mentioned the cross-platform stuff. That's been a huge pain for me. I know Gleb mentioned in the comments in our chat here, that's thumbs up from him too. I would say that's been the biggest challenge, especially in my open source tooling efforts, from like people using the tooling as well as contributing to it. It's been just a huge pain. So yeah, if we could just make it so FS extra doesn't need to exist and cross-spawn doesn't need to exist, then that would be a huge step forward. And like rimraf too, bunch of modules that I wish didn't exist. But like that said, we were going to talk a little bit about what is working in the Node ecosystem, and I think that's one thing that is working, is that these solutions do exist. They may be, you might consider them workarounds, but the fact that they exist makes it like a lot easier than it was a couple years ago before they existed. So that's one of the reasons why we prefer to use Node for our tooling. It's just that lots and lots of problems have been solved. It's easy to build these kinds of tools. So Yeah, let me just make sure. Oh yeah, another thing that hasn't been mentioned is debugging could still use some work. I mean the debugging tools already, like with the inspector flag and everything, like that's awesome. It's really, really good. I think mostly the debugging story is an education problem, both from the perspective of using tools that hook into the debugging utilities that Node provides, as well as just people understanding that the Node modules directory is just like, there's just a bunch of JavaScript in there. And so you can actually like console log and do whatever else you want to in there. So I don't know what the Node project can do from an education standpoint, but as a maintainer of open source software, if people just understood a little bit better how to debug things, I would get a lot fewer issues, both in my tooling as well as my like other runtime related modules too. So those have been big pain points for me.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I would suggest if there's like a particular use case, you post an issue in the diagnostics working group, because I know there's some work there to try and capture the use cases, and if it's like a unique debugging use case for module tooling, it would be good to have that captured there and then considered as part of the documentation that people are working on.
Yeah, that's fair. I think a lot of people don't know that you can run, like if you're doing ESLint, for example, you can run node./nodemodules.bin ESLint and then -- inspect. Like if people just understood that they could do something like that, it would make a big difference. And so maybe there's something that we can do there to facilitate that kind of education.
Yeah, like there was already an effort, not making a huge amount of progress, just due to people's time, to document the tools and how to use them. So if, for example, exactly how you want people to debug and you wrote something up that explained that, we could probably get that on the nodejs.org website. And from there it can be, we can publicize it through tweets, whatever else. So
cool.
I will also add, someone working on the website redesign just said that that's in the getting started plan that we're working on for the getting started.
Right.
Yeah, that's super. Like in the browser, it's just so obvious, or it's so much easier to, just pull up the dev tools. In Node, it's a little bit less obvious. So that would be really helpful.
Right on. So want to make sure we get all the way back around the horn. So Gleb, what are the pain points?
So people mentioned Windows and cross-platform. I want to go back to the Linux terminal support. Right, and progress bars are just killing us in Docker containers, right? So we had so many problems. So I really want to see progress bars and better terminal, right? Detection, dimensions in Node core.
It's definitely an interesting thing. I've not heard of that before as an issue. So yeah, that's definitely something. I'll follow up with you and try to capture that.
Ben?
Hi there. A lot of things have already been covered. So I'll just touch on one topic area. So obviously Node has an intimate relationship with V8, having its own copy of the V8 source code. And stuff like NAPI to hopefully work with other runtimes is pretty cool, but still mostly V8 for the time being. I feel like there's sometimes a source of bugs is the sort of backporting process for bringing changes from V8 into Node. In particular, we had some segmentation fault issues in a previous version of Meteor that were ultimately related to sort of a partial backport of some garbage collection V8 changes. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if in general an effort to get more up to date with the latest V8 version would put Node on a better footing in terms of that relationship going forward. One aspect of this that's sort of Meteor specific is a decision that was made before I joined the company to enable something like async await, but but crazier. It's called fibers or coroutines. You can kind of think of it as async await, but the await can appear anywhere as long as there's an async function on the call stack, not just in the body of the function. And the reason this is such an issue for us is implementing that at the V8 level has some pretty gnarly implications. Basically, these fibers look a lot like threads to V8, and V8, as long as you lock the isolate object, is willing to let you switch threads, and even has like thread local data in a lot of places. But when you jump up to the node level, V8 just doesn't expose much of that like threading stuff, like the thread local stuff, and so newer projects like the async hooks project aren't really able to be thread aware when they're implemented in Node rather than in V8. And so again, the like relationship between those two projects gets complicated, especially if you're like depending in some weird way on like V8 internals, as we unfortunately are.
So is that just an example where you use threading, or is it across the board? Because I'm wondering, is what you're saying you wish Node had better support for threads, or is it more just that was one example of where you're using internals?
That is the one thing that keeps me up at night. So yeah, it's a big example in my mind. I don't know. We had another bug related to that. Like we wouldn't have had this problem if we weren't using fibers. That resulted in segmentation faults in Node 8.10. And we did a big bisect and figured out that, again, it was a V8 backport that could have been done differently. And I don't know, just very recently, this isn't a huge. We ship a version of Node with Meteor. We can also ship a custom version of Node if we have to. So of course, there was a security update for Node 8.11, and out of conservatism, that didn't include the fix for this problem. So we're looking at a situation where we can't actually update to Node 8.11 for the security updates right now until Node 8.11.2 comes out with that patch. So I don't know. It seems like the root issue here is something about the Node V8 relationship being sort of like one of cherry picking changes back and sort of making progress over time, but like also like piecemeal progress between releases.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's been a big push to keep V8 more up to date, but
yeah,
the sort of fundamental mismatch between the 6-week cycle and our 3-year cycle or 30-month cycle is the challenge that we face.
Yeah, and we're happy to do a lot of this work, like just to keep Meteor working, basically. But really excited about having this meeting and sort of opening that dialogue so that we can let you know when we have problems. And
so Ben, it sounds like there would be a great opportunity to get deeper involved in the VM working group. That is the group. We've shipped NAPI there, but that is the group that tends to focus on stability there, and we've worked very hard to build out NAPI, which is an ABI stable, representation of what Node expects. So by expressing Meteor's needs in that ABI stable layer that Node uses, rather than which is the contract that we use and V8 uses to say if we've broken anything. So tuning into that and participating in that work seems like a good area to get involved because as a project we very much pulled back away from that. Not having any sort of expression and just using internals. So if you're reaching through and grabbing internals, you're working against the trend that we're trying to evolve from. So it'd be great to have your participation there and get your perspective and learn more about those use cases.
And I do think that's also a good place that we should probably be mentioning the distributors channel that Michael mentioned. And we definitely should get you, Meteor, involved in that in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, so far that other channel is, it's just sort of an ad hoc when used. I like Dan's suggestion that You know, if you looked at an API and said, these are the things we still can't do using that, that would at least give, you know, we can't implement everything there, but that would give us some good information to say, this is another, you know, we're missing these key areas that people still depend on the internals and think about them. And it would be a good way to get the discussion on that front going.
Okay, great. I definitely have some ideas.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Well, Tom, did you have any thing that you wanted to add in the, you know, the pain points?
Not really, not at this time. At least.
Great. So I want to go ahead and wrap up. I want to give you know, Tierney as ComCom chair and Michael Dawson as TSC chair an opportunity to share some closing thoughts on you know, given this feedback. So Tierney, I'll give you the floor first.
Sure. So I would definitely like to just make sure that, you know, everyone who's participated in this, and obviously we're over time, so, you know, including the people who've had to drop, that we really do value your input, and we are actively trying to make the channels between the kind of Userland ecosystem and Node Core and the Node project more open and tear down barriers between that. I've heard from, you know, quite a few people that there's perceived barriers. And so I'm personally trying to strip those down as much as possible. And I know, you know, others in the project are as well, because, you know, we really do care about the feedback of the Userland and of the people who are using Node. Like, that's why we're building Node. So, you know, we do definitely value your input and welcome contributions. We definitely don't require them. But, you know, even if you just want to reach out to someone on Twitter or, you know, via DM or via email or, you know, comment in an issue, we are always going to be happy to help, and at least try to find common ground and, you know, make it a more open space. So yeah, feel free to reach out to people, and, you know, we are happy to try to assist.
Thanks, Tierney. Michael?
Yeah, I think just echoing, you know, we want to, you know, forge the connections and get the right groups of people together to work on the particular issues. You know, I think this was a good sort of introduction to what people are working on. I think in my mind, I see next steps is to try and figure out some like concrete things that we want to move forward. So for example, you know, I heard things like platform support, the issue of, you know, Node V8 internals. If we sort of generated a list of those, we could then figure out, you know, as Tierney asked in the earlier discussion, what's the best mechanism? Should we get together back as a group and talk those through? Can we work through them through GitHub issues? Because I think it's a matter of, you know, sometimes finding the right group of people to have the discussion with, and, you know, and if there isn't one, seeing if we can get a group of people who are interested in sort of having that discussion. Because, you know, provided, you know, you have time to participate, I think we'll find other people who have time to participate as well, and, you know, sort of bit by bit, hopefully make progress in the right direction. So I think, you know, hopefully in the issue, we can figure out what those next steps are. I'll also say, if, you know, if any of you have some specific things you want to try and move forward earlier than, you know, that discussion may take place, feel free to reach out to myself, and I'm sure Tierney would say the same thing. And we'll figure out, you know, what kind of next steps we can start in advance.
Great. Thanks, man. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. It was a great discussion. Really appreciated all of feedback and, you know, opportunity to, you know, begin this discussion. You know, in terms of, you know, reference points, you know, Nodejs Tooling folks, I'd love to see you collaborate with Chris Heller and, you know, begin to, you know, form your own space. I'm happy to help and, you know, facilitate that, and, you know, work with Tierney and Michael Dawson to find the, you know, the appropriate landing space, whether that's community committee or in the, you know, technical side of the house. Again, thanks for your time. Mihai, if you could hold on a second, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I just want to make sure that there's so much good discussion in the participant chat. I want to make sure we go ahead and grab some of the comments that folks made there and put them in the minutes. because things like ePerm and FS Watch and stuff like that. I want to make sure that those are captured in the minutes. So when all the Node collaborators go back and look at those issues, we can see the record of it. So thanks again, everybody, for taking the time today and joining us for this public user feedback session on Nodejs Tooling. Thanks again.
Thanks, and look forward to talking to everybody the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.